Hello everyone, today I just wanted to give you a quick tutorial on how to go about setting something up called Firebase for your Flutter applications. One thing I want to point out about Firebase before we get started is that the key similarity between Flutter and Firebase is that they're both made by Google, and they're both very well maintained, and the documentation on both are great. Another benefit of that is they both play very nicely together. The implementation is almost seamless, and there's a lot of support for Flutter applications in Firebase. Today we're going to go over just the bare minimum of Firebase. If we want to do some more on this series, more than happy to dive deeper into it, but for this one what we're going to do is set up Firebase Analytics for your Flutter application. First thing we're going to do is head over to the Firebase console and hit add new project. Enter your project name. For this one I'm just going to call it YT Tutorials. Hit continue. We want to enable Google Analytics for this project, so I'm going to hit continue. Then it'll ask us to add an account. For this one I'm going to select the top one, which will automatically create a new property in this account. Create project. Give it a few seconds. And there we go, our new project is ready. YT Tutorials. I'm going to hit continue and it will take me to the dashboard page of this new project. First thing we need to do is get an app hooked up to Firebase. So what I'm going to do is go to either cogwheel project settings or just select either iOS or Android. We'll go with Android first. The order in which you do these makes absolutely no difference. The only thing to bear in mind is that because Flutter is cross-platform, if you support both Android and iOS, you'll need to add two different Firebase apps. Setup for both is incredibly simple, but for this one we'll go for Android first. So the first thing we need is the package name. Expand in the Android folder, app, build.gradle, and grabbing the application ID, and then we paste that in here. Just as a little tip, if you hover over this question mark icon, it tells you exactly where to look for. You're looking for the application ID in your app level build.gradle. I'll just call this Tutorials Android. You can also optionally add a SHA-1 certificate. Typically, I would leave this until you're ready to push the code of the application to production, because this uniquely ties one of your apps to a Firebase project. And by providing that before your app is production ready, you're essentially linking the particular Firebase project with the particular app project for life. So it's just best to leave this until you're absolutely certain that your current working application and your current working Firebase project are aligned and they're good to go. This tutorial from the Firebase team themselves also highlight the advantages of not specifying the SHA-1 certificate right off the bat. So go ahead and register the app. The next thing to do is to download a Google Services.json file. I'll just do that by pressing this button here. That's downloaded one, and you can see for me, because I download quite a lot of these Google Services.json files, it's got the 1 in parentheses around it. So when we move that across to our VS Code folder structure, we'll need to remove that. You can see here I've added my newly downloaded Google Services.json file to the top level of the app folder within Android. Just let me remove the parentheses 1 in that, and we're good to go. Now that we've downloaded the config file and placed it in the correct location, we'll hit next. This next section around adding the Firebase SDK, they've very nicely given us some code completions just to verify. On our project level build.gradle, we've got a couple of code snippets that we just need to verify that exist, and if they're not there, Google's very nicely given us the code snippets to use. So the first thing to do is in our project level build.gradle is ensure that the Google's Maven repository is being used, and we can see that it is. Next is to add the Google Services dependency, again to the project level build.gradle, so we'll add that. And then finally, we need to double check that the Google's Maven repository is being used in all projects as well as build script, and we can see that it is. Google's Maven repository is being used in both the all project section as well as the build script section. Moving on to the app level build.gradle, we've got a couple of additions to make as well. First of which being applying the Google Services plugin, and we'll add that in. And these next two lines you can ignore if you're following along for a Flutter application, although so far there's nothing been done that can't be done for an Android native one. For Flutter, we don't want to add dependencies in this way. We don't want to add them in the build.gradle. We have the pubspec.yaml for that. So as far as we're concerned, if you're following along for a Flutter application for Android, you can just hit next and then continue to console. And there we have it. We've got an Android application hooked up into our Firebase project. Let's now do the same for iOS. So I'll hit on Add App, iOS. We get the bundle ID by opening Xcode into the Runner tab and grabbing the bundle identifier. Again, similar to Android, if you're not sure where to find your bundle ID, just hover over the question mark. App nickname, we'll just call this tutorial iOS. And the App Store ID, which is optional, similar to the SHA-1 for Android, this is essentially the iOS counterpart of that. Leave this out until you are ready to put your code through to production. And no prizes for guessing what we need to do next. Download a Google Services info.plist file. And then what we'll do is just drag that into the runner folder. Hit copy items if needed. And then hit finish. We'll head back to the Firebase console and hit next. The Android implementation, we don't need to do any of this here. We can actually just fast forward through the remainder of the iOS implementation. These steps here are for iOS native applications, whereas we are of course building a Flutter application. So I'm going to hit next again, and then hit continue to console. And as you can see, in our YouTube tutorials Firebase project, we've got two applications, one Android and one iOS. Now the only thing left to do is initialize Firebase in the Flutter code, and that should be us good to go. Now head on over to your pubspec YAML file, and there is one particular package that Firebase depends on, and that's Firebase Core. And then the second package we need for our tutorial today is Firebase Analytics. Go ahead and press save on that, and it should fire up a Flutter pub get command. If not, just head to your terminal and run that, and that will fetch all the dependencies you need to make sure that you're able to use Firebase Core as well as Firebase Analytics. Once you're in main.dart, head up to the top function of main, and before run app, we need to add a couple of lines of code just to ensure that Firebase is correctly initialized. Those are widgets flutter binding dot ensure initialized, and then await Firebase dot initialize app. Two things wrong with this. First, we need to import the Firebase library, as well as make this main function asynchronous. Now it's important that the lines appear in this order. We need to call this line first before then running any business logic before the run app line is called. Now what the widgets flutter binding dot ensure initialize does is returns an instance of the widgets binding and creating and initializing it if it's necessary. And you only need to call this method if you need the binding before calling run app. And because we want to initialize Firebase, we need that, so we call this line first. Once those two lines are in the main.dart, we can just run the application. Once your app's deployed either to your emulator or physical device, all that's left to do now in order to verify that we have correctly hooked up Firebase Analytics is to head back to the Firebase dashboard, so we'll do that now. Head down to the Analytics dashboard and see that we've had one user in the last 30 minutes. And we've even got the countries right. Now, Firebase Analytics gives you a lot for free. So what I'm able to see is the number of users in the last 30 minutes, as well as usage data over the last 30 days, 7 days and 1 day. I'm able to see the users by app version. I'm able to see the latest app release overview. I'm able to see average engagement times, sessions per user, overall app stability, user retention, user activity by cohort. I'm just going through and reading off the cards that you can see here for yourself. Even down to the revenue, if you have conversion events logged, mean, there is a lot of information you get for free, and as you can tell by the simplicity of the implementation that we've went through in this guide, you get a lot for very little effort on your end. So in this video, I've only scratched the surface of what is possible with Firebase and Flutter. If you want to find out more, head on over to this link here, firebase.flutter.dev, and you can see a list of all the stable plugins that Firebase is able to implement into Flutter. You've got analytics, which we've used, authentication, Firestore, functions, cloud messaging, which can be used for things like push notifications. You've got the core one, which is the prerequisite for any other Firebase dependencies you want to add in-app messaging, Crashlytics, real-time database, and then those are just the stable ones. We've still got ones in beta and in preview and in alpha, as well as some deprecated ones that are no longer used, but you can see here that we get a lot of potential functionality from Firebase, and as you've seen by the implementation of analytics, it's all quite simple, and I'm more than happy to make more tutorials on more Firebase plugins and implementations with Flutter. Just let me know what one you would want to see next. But until then, thanks very much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.